this isn't on. My name is Carlton Bailey. I'm the chairman of the Adult Education Committee, at least at this point. And I'm here today to introduce Mr. Jose Ramirez, who is an art teacher and at our school Esperanza that we have a connection with. And it's particularly gratifying today because of the connection between faith and art. We, in our history of art, have had a long history of connection with paintings, either of God or of the Old Testament or the New Testament. And our most famous paintings, Michelangelo's Sistine Chapel, where God is touching the finger of Adam, and of course, The Last Supper, and all of the paintings by Raphael and Caravaggio and many, many others. And one of the reasons we see so many of those paintings, of course, is that's where the money was. And they could pay for these paintings and they commissioned them. But some of it was just because of the artist's connection to God. And I wanted to point out Vermeer's painting of a woman holding a balance where she's weighing the difference between heaven and earth. And particularly of Van Gogh, who was born to, his father was a Dutch pastor. And you can see God in a lot of his paintings, which he wrote about, including Starry Nights and so many other of his paintings, the one with the still Bible. And so I've always had this connection between faith and art, and I'm happy today to introduce Jose, who will talk to us about his art. Jose was born in Los Angeles, and I think you've all read in the bulletin a little bit about his background. And he's been teaching, I think 20 to 30 years. We hope a lot more. And one of the interesting things about Jose is that he has about 300 fruit trees in his backyard. He's into gardening as well as art. And this is going to have a special significance today to some of his art as well. And I'm looking forward to his telling us about that as well. So Jose, thank you for coming today.
And thank you for having me. My name is Jose Ramirez, and I'm driving here from the east side. I live in City Terrace, and I work in Pico Union, which is just about 2 or 3 blocks east of MacArthur Park. And I've been at Esperanza Elementary for like 20 years. I started there in 1999 when my second daughter was born. And I started teaching at LA Unified 1993 after I graduated from Berkeley with my MFA in art, and I went there for my undergrad degree as well. Can you all hear me okay?
Yes.
Cool. So I paint, and I also teach elementary school, and I also garden, and I'm a parent of 3 daughters, and I'm an Angelino. And I wanted to share some of my paintings today and talk a little bit about how all those 3 intersect and how they feed my soul. And I hope that I am able to explain why I paint and what is it about teaching that keeps me in the profession, and also about the importance for me about gardening and cultivating strong soil, healthy soil. So this first painting here is titled Street Vendors, Vendedores Ambulantes, and it's kind of trying to put down into history or talk about or recognize and acknowledge the people who work and sell things to us in the streets. So, everybody from paleteros or people who sell candy to people who work in your backyard, who sell you tacos, who sell flowers and balloons and fruit. And a lot of the times my students' parents are in these occupations, or they'll tell me after a long weekend or for Valentine's that they went with their parents to sell flowers and or candy for Halloween and stuff. So it's like people of LA are a really important topic in my paintings. I'm not just going to go through them and talk a little bit about them and a little bit about how and why I painted them. This one is called Los Angeles Landscape, and I painted it last year. It's one of my favorite paintings, actually. Like, it always kind of changes because I'll start off with, oh, this is my favorite painting, but then I'll do a different one and my favorite painting. So this one I did, and it was kind of like playing around with an idea. I got asked about doing a mural for an elementary school that houses the first elementary school of LA, which is this building right here, 1898. And it's at Ascot Avenue Elementary, the first school where I taught, where I did two murals there in 1994, 1995 with my brother, one of them of Angela Davis and one of them of Rigoberta Menchú, to kind of like bring two heroes, two women activists, one from Guatemala and one from California, in a community that had Latino and Black population. And as I was developing this idea, I kind of took it a little bit further back to the first mission, the San Gabriel mission, and I was playing around with it and trying to figure out how to continue how to keep telling the story. So I went back a little bit further and showed references to the Tongva culture, the first inhabitants, the indigenous people of LA. And if you look closely, if I put on my glasses and look a little bit closer, I'll see like deer and other animals. And it still wasn't done yet until I kind of came in and put the skeletons underneath the church to kind of highlight sometimes the impact that religion, especially the Catholic religion, had on a lot of the native populations in the Americas. But I had a lot of fun painting it, and it's kind of the view of what I had when I was first teaching in room 219 at Ascot Avenue Elementary. I kind of had a view of downtown and the mountains of that, so I'll always remember that. And I went back and painted. I don't think this would become the mural. I ended up proposing something different, but I wanted to take this painting in this direction. This one is called Mammoths on Wilshire. And again, kind of trying to put us in a context where it's not just everybody thinks there's no history in LA or nothing happened here before these buildings showed up in Hollywood, but there was lots of things that were happening here, and the more I learn about it, the more I know that LA is a very important place in history, and there was a lot of things happening. So I painted the mammoths. There's some birds everywhere, and so I was trying to like play with my style a little bit as well. This one I did last year as well. This one's called Tree Family, and inspired, of course, by a lot of artists who paint trees and stuff, but wanted to play around again with really small, and you'll see in some of my other paintings how like painting micro things and then also macro things is like something that I've been trying to play around with, and seeing how small the little dots can get, and how in some other paintings how those little dots become people. I'll show a couple other paintings about trees in a little bit, but this one's called A School for Los Angeles, and I painted it last year as well. I'm mostly showing paintings from the last 2 or 3 years, although like if you go on my website you can see paintings that go way back. This is a mural I did for UCLA School of Education. It's at Center X, and it's 14 feet by 8 feet tall. So kind of like around the size of this space here. And they commissioned it, and I was telling them what I wanted to do, and I showed them a painting that I had done where it was just this one centralized image here of people studying outside, and they were excited because it's kind of the direction they want to take their school. I don't know if you know about their School of Education, but it's very progressive and social activist oriented. My wife went to Center X and got her credential there. And then her heart cracked when she became an actual teacher, and like everything that you learn and want to do, LA Unified makes it really hard for you to kind of be an ideal when you have so much testing and things like that to do. But this painting kind of talks about the possibilities of education, especially outdoors, and like remediation and taking care of like what's happening to our environment, and a lot of other little things that I put in there. And I had a lot of fun painting it. And again, it's trying to like loosen up with my style, and a lot of my style, everything is really, like if we go back, everything is really tight, and there's a lot of lines and stuff. And in this one, the landscape was trying to be a little bit looser. I do a lot of things with Los Angeles and like landmarks and places. This is a larger painting that I did of the Dodger Stadium. It took a long time. It was a lot of fun, but it was really hard to kind of like, I was working off of a picture, and it was like, how do you simplify a lot of the complexities of all the different buildings and stuff, and find a composition that can kind of read as Dodger Stadium with the perspective. I was playing with the sky too, because we have really dramatic skies, and lately I've been playing with the skies at night and doing paintings with Los Angeles at night. And the lights of the stars, if we would see the stars, they're still there, but we don't get to see them, and I want to remind us that they're there because they connect us to the world, right, to the universe, and that's where we came from. And so this one is of Griffith Park, and it's fun kind of experimenting. How can you do it, right? Like put all these little dots, and then I would do a wash of color to kind of have them recede, and then bring in some more and play around with it, and with the perspective, and it's kind of right up the alley of what I had been trying to pursue with my work and stuff. So kind of going from these guys to these. And this next one is called Los Angeles Traffic at Night for the 405. And again, playing around with like little dots to show space. And I kind of want to do this with the paintings that I do of soil, but this is one that I did over the course of a couple years. Sometimes I'll go back and I'll revise my painting. So originally it was just a tree, and I liked it just as a tree, but then I was like, okay, what if I put somebody working on the tree and spreading stardust or like minerals and stuff, so that the tree can grow. And I was reading about tarot cards, and there was like the card, the magician, and they talk about how the magician is somebody who kind of is in the middle of things that happen, a catalyst and stuff. And I thought, well, this person who kind of represents my dad, somebody who inspired me about gardening, is kind of like out there with a lot of faith and bringing in these things that are going to help the tree grow and produce a lot of different fruit for us. So then the next one is called Born of Corn. And again, like I like to play with color and like compositions that, this looks almost like buildings too, but it's called Born of Corn. This next one is, look, I just want to make sure that I'm not going to go over it. I have enough time to show everything. This one is called El Río Porciúncula. So the original name of Los Angeles, if you've seen it, is a really long name, Nuestra Señora la Reina de Los Ángeles del Río Porciúncula. And although we don't have a river, a lot of the times, or a river is kind of like a little stream or something really small, there is water that passes through LA. So I was trying to reimagine or imagine what it could have looked like before we had kind of put it under concrete, and kind of researched the fauna and the flora that would have been here, and kind of like have the buildings there as a reminder, so that all of this as a reminder, kind of like play around with time and the sky as well. And then I go into these paintings where, this one's called Walking on Stolen Land, just to kind of recognize that Los Angeles was built on Donga land. And I painted a bunch of paintings with the two characters walking down the street. They were walking near gardeners, they were walking near street vendors, they were walking, in this one they're walking over the stolen land. And this one's a celebration of Dia de los Muertos in Los Angeles. It's become a big celebration and a big event where all over LA there's different places that for Dia de los Muertos, which is November 1st, 2nd, there's processions and stuff, people remembering those who came before us. Another thing that I do, I try to bring in my teaching stuff into my paintings as well. In 2019, when we had the teacher strike, the first one, we just got through another one. Every day after the strike, and it was raining. You all remember that during that 2019 it was raining, and it was a really fun time. But every night after the strike, I would go home and make a painting and print out posters and bring them the next day. So I did I think we were on strike for 5 or 6 days. I did 5 paintings, and each one had a different character holding a different sign. And this is a painting of downtown. Of the first strike. So we're all in red because UTLA, our union, is a red color. And again, kind of like going back to what I was saying about showing tiny little things, right? And small things. And then we just got through another strike, as you probably know, and we were about to go on another strike. The teachers were, but we're voting this week, the teachers. So the previous strike was for SEIU. This is the Beaudry building, LA Unified headquarters, and this was, I don't know if you saw pictures of the turnout, but it was a strike for SEIU, so all of the support staff, all of the TAs, the bus drivers, the cafeteria workers went on strike to ask for a 30% raise after 3 days, and Karen Bass getting involved. The union, the district agreed, but this was from day one, and there was a lot of people. It was in the rain, and it was a beautiful experience to be there. So that, and then this one, there is red, but there's also purple because those are the colors of the SEIU Local 99. So that's 2019, and then this one is this year. Said SEIU purchased this painting so that they could have it in their offices to inspire teachers. I mean, they're union members. This one is from Hollywood Boulevard, from the Black Lives Matters protests or marches that happened in 2021. And it's at the corner of Highland, and it's like this exercise that I put myself through to see like how to get all of this stuff in there, and it's a lot of fun, but I get myself lost in them. And I'm gonna get into a few of my education paintings as well. This is our school, Esperanza. If you've been to our school, this is our playground, and I did the painting a couple years ago, and I kept adding more and more people, and there's some kids playing the violin, and then there's these balls that are jumping around. This is the inside. This is La Maestra, what a classroom might look like. My classroom. And then this one's called small group rotation. So as educators, we try to put a lot of the work on the students. So this is a student who is kind of guiding her group on an activity in the back of the room. And it's called small group rotation. This one is a painting I did this year. This one's called classroom conversation, which is another thing we try to encourage students to. So in this one, it's called the fishbowl, where they come up to the front and they have a conversation, and the students are actively listening and going to give them feedback. That way the feedback's not coming from the teacher. And usually they give each other feedback like, I couldn't hear you, or you weren't paying attention, or you went off topic. But it's really important for them to be able to listen to each other and give each other feedback, but it's also important for students to know and feel confident about going in front, because as you know, it's not easy to go in front, especially when you're a young student. So I find it really important to make sure that my students have that skill and are able to articulate themselves in front of people. This one is Los Angeles Garden. In 2019, I had this big exhibit at Los Angeles Public Library, the one in downtown in the Getty Gallery, and I had a bunch of my paintings, and some of these are really big. This one is really big, and just real quick, I had like the variety of different fruits and vegetables and stuff, and growing, people tending to the land, and then this is where like I really want to take my work, is like exploring and kind of bringing to light what goes on underneath our soil. But before I talk more about that, I'm just going to talk about a couple more different things. Another thing that I like to document is music, especially Latino musicians in Los Angeles. This is a band called Chicano Batman, and this is a band called Quetzal, 2 bands that I get to work with, and I make paintings of, but I've also painted other bands that are like local to the community, and kind of like, again, to kind of like put them into history, and we have them to memorialize them in a painting. In addition to doing paintings, I also do children's books. These are some of my children's books throughout the years. The one on the right-hand corner, the bottom one, is my most recent one. The one above is a biography on the musician Carlos Santana. And these are some other books that I've done. This is the first one that I did. So over the years, but this one on the bottom right-hand corner will be coming out in August of this year. And it's a bilingual book about a father who's a farm worker told through the perspective of his son. I do murals as well, and so this is a mural I did in an elementary school. I showed you the one from UCLA, but basically this one is about migration and how people come from the land or from the ocean and how they get uprooted and like their memories, right? So I got to do this a couple years ago at a school in Pico Union. This is what my studio looks like, where I have my paintings and I paint, and you know, people will ask, do you have a gallery? I've shown with galleries, but I don't show at a gallery. I usually have people come over to my studio to do studio visits or through my website. And so now I want to talk a little bit about my garden. This is a painting of a person sharing a persimmon, which we have a few different trees. When I first started gardening and getting really into gardening, this is what I got to work with, and this is my daughter Sol, who's now 17 years old. And so you'll see how the difference is. But it was empty, and we terraced it because we were on a hillside. So we took some of this, where you see my studio, a couple pictures back, this was all dirt. All that dirt went to go and flatten out our garden, our space in the backyard. This is what it looks like now. And then we have hundreds of fruit trees, and it's drip irrigation. We had a lot of rain. We had over 33 inches in our backyard. I measure it, and this is one of the reasons why we grow it. Of course, we get delicious fruit like these donut peaches, but we also get to see what happens during the different parts of the year. Where this is the same tree, right? Maybe a month ago or 6 weeks ago, and it was beginning to come out of dormancy, but. To see what kind of stuff can grow in LA, so that when people come and visit my studio, or I have an open studio event where it's kind of like a time for me to show collectors and people who follow my work in my studio, but then also for them to walk around the garden and see what's going on in the garden, and see what we can do. You know, like there's much living stuff as there is decaying and dying stuff, because this stuff feeds the soil, which feeds the garden, and creates this like cycle of life in our garden that I'm really appreciating and loving. Right, we have this is our pathway coming out of the backyard. Coming out of the back of the house, and we have our apple trees coming in, and our stinging nettles, and some mango trees. And really, in LA, we can grow a lot of different varieties. This is we do garden tours sometimes. And then I run into my studio and make a painting of it because I love it. And so this one's called Garden Walk. This is what then we had an empty lot next door to our house, and I kept asking the owner if he was ever going to sell it, and eventually he got around to saying, "Hey, I'm going to sell it." So we cleared it all up and buried some of this green matter, terraced it again, and then this is what it looks like now with our nasturtiums and peas and calendula and our veggies and stuff, and getting to see what can kind of happen in our garden and how we can have good soil, right? Because my dad's generation, he had a lot of trees in his backyard, but he was quick to put Miracle Grow or do things that were not good for the soil, and had pest management that is questionable now, right? We don't want to do that kind of pest management, so I don't bring in any sort of foreign things. I do compost tea. I just mix some neem oil with some soap so that I could kind of try to get rid of the little insects that come out at night and then they eat everything up by the next morning, which I'm sure you've experienced as well. It's like, but if you spray that stuff, it actually can work. Yeah, you can grow your plants. When I was at Berkeley, I did a lot of stuff with clay. This is like a little makeshift clay studio that I have at the very back part of our house for when I do get inspired to do clay. But I usually just get pulled into my painting studio because it's more of that's kind of more where I'm at. Although I do love to do ceramic work and all of that. And I worked with a couple of professors up at Berkeley that, you know, that's what I focused on in my graduate school years. But when I came back to Los Angeles, it was easier for me to do paintings. But if you want to know more about me and my garden, there was this LA Times article that came out last year, and it was a feature article where they talked a lot about the food I'm growing and how it connects to my art and some other things. But from the garden to the classroom, right, I want to spend a little bit of time talking a little bit about what I do at Esperanza, because it is truly something that really feeds my soul. Not only am I teaching, but they're teaching me a lot every day, and that's a very humbling thing. I go home and I reflect and I think about how can I be a better teacher. So in this particular picture, just on Friday, I did a lot of cuttings of the fruit trees. So a lot of them have fruit on them, and we had been studying. We made a fruit book throughout the week So, and I divided the pages into the different families of fruits. So there's the citrus fruits, the stone fruits, the tropical fruits, the berries, the cucurbits, like all of these, the squash and the melons. Made a cute little book, and then I brought in all of these different cuttings. And the idea was that first they were going to have to talk with each other and match all of the different fruits, and then find them in the book and have a conversation. And it went really well. It was a lot of fun. But at Esperanza, I used to be a third grade teacher for like 15 years. I taught fifth grade for a few years, but this year I was either going to leave the classroom because I kind of want to just maybe sometimes focus more on the other two things that I'm doing, but I also didn't want to leave because I love it so much. So I was able to negotiate or apply for this position as intervention support coordinator, and I added the art teacher part. So I'm providing intervention for students who might need a little bit more support through arts, but also language intervention, because one thing that I kind of became an expert at after all these years is like how to deliver English language instruction to English learners, because I was an English learner and I was shy and I didn't know how to articulate myself. So I wanted to make sure that I do that with my students. So now instead of just teaching third graders all day long, this is what my typical day looks like. I start the day with fourth and fifth graders who are newcomers, who are international students. They've only been here for 1 or 2 years. Then I work with third graders who are at risk for not meeting their grade level standards. I work with a group of kinder kids, which I'll show you some pictures of. They're amazing. I never thought I would be teaching kinder, but I only teach them for 50 minutes, and that's plenty. That's a lot. And then I work with the second graders who are at grade level, if not beyond, and we do stuff with them that's going to be kind of an enrichment thing. So we might do some artwork. We did the fruit book the other day. With them, it's a lot of reviewing stuff, but I can't make it boring, so I try to bring in a lot of art activities. In this particular day, we were learning about bell hooks. It was during the time that they were Florida was banning all kinds of books, and she was on the list. And I was like, how could they ban B-Boy Buzz and Homemade Love, which are these books that are about identity and they're really beautiful poems? So we brought them in. My principal, which many of you may know, Mr. Rumble, was like, well, we're going to buy them a class set. So they all got to take these copies home. We did an oil pass on. We learned about an artist and wrote about a memorable event. This is how my students sometimes spell my name. This was an activity I did with the fourth and fifth graders, the newcomers. It's a painting of Los Angeles, but with their name, they're kind of like claiming themselves, putting themselves in Los Angeles. And this is a student doing a painting. Her name is, she is an artist. It's like you can just tell every time she comes into the room, she knows what she's doing, and she is very confident, an artist. A lot of my students are from Central America, and in this picture you see there's 3 different Central American flags being painted. Nicaragua, El Salvador, and Honduras. And they're from those countries, those 3 students. And so they really wanted to paint their flags, so I brought out, it didn't take a lot of different colors, it's just blue. We get to do, this is working with the third graders, building and using what you would use in math, right, to show values of hundreds, tens, and ones, to build something and then see what is the value of your tower and stuff. So that's a really fun activity. It gets really loud, but it's really fun to see them building. I love to build, so I try to find activities that you love as well. And this one, they're building a bridge and seeing how much it could sustain, and trying different things to see how you can engineer a bridge to sustain more tiles. This is my kinder group, and they're painting inspired by Basquiat. In this one, we were reading a biography on Basquiat. In this one, they were reading a book by an artist named Faith Ringgold called Tar Beach, and it's about a little girl who flies over the Brooklyn Bridge and flies over all the buildings that her daddy built, who was a union worker. This one, my students are making papel picado. So you use tissue paper, you fold it, and you cut these cool patterns, and then you put it into a string, and you make this really nice decoration. There's some other pictures there. We use Legos to build stuff and have fun, but then I saw some cool activities where you can do it to find math equations. So this is, if you were ever wondering what is Common Core, this is one thing of Common Core, is it's trying to figure out different ways that numbers equal each other, or different ways that numbers can break down, especially at the earlier ages. is to know what 20 can equal so many different things. These are some of the books we use, and this is the book B-Boy Buzz, the one I was talking about. That's Homemade Love, the other book by Bell Hooks. This is the book Tar Beach that I was telling you about. That's the Jean-Michel Basquiat book. That's the book about John Coltrane's life. Stevie Wonder. This is the book Carmen Lomas Garza. And this is a great book. It's a little bit older for my kids, but this is a great biography of Malcolm X when he was a little kid, written by one of his daughters. And so when I introduced John Coltrane to my students, these pictures were equally important, right? This book is a beautiful book, and it talks about the sounds he heard when he was a little kid. But for my students to see what he was like when he was a little kid and what his kids looked like and him performing, my students would hold those pictures every day. There's a drawing inspired by Basquiat. And there they are holding some of their oil pastels. This is a student making a painting with acrylic paint. They start off really neat, and then they get, because they just get kind of messy, so the next day we go in with markers and kind of bring everything back. This would be our board for when we were learning about bell hooks. Again, the pictures of her are equally important so that my students know that their possibilities and that they can aspire to being writers. And who came before them? Here we made a bell hooks book with some of the different books. Whoops. In this picture, the student has gray hair because that was like the 100th day of school, and they had to dress like they were 100 years old. And there's a couple students making a painting. This is what I was talking about. The drawing is so detailed and beautiful, and after they put all the paint, because the paints kind of mix each other together, but this is their first experiences with paint. They still love it. It just it's a far distance from where they started. The last few pictures that I have of my classroom, I think, are a lot of collage. So we did like cutouts, right? The cutouts is really important because they get to practice cutting and hand-eye coordination. And these are the collages that my kindergarten students did. And so they're like three-dimensional and they're barely hanging on, but somehow they're really amazing and they're like look really beautiful. I have them all hanging up by one corner of the room. This is an artist that we study. Her name is Alma Thomas. She was also an educator who lived in Washington during the 1950s and 60s. And she was an abstract artist, a black abstract artist. This is an architect that we studied, Zaha Hadid, who's Iraqi. And you've probably seen a lot of her buildings, but when I saw this book maybe 5 years ago and I read it, I was like, I gotta figure out how to bring it in. So one of the things that I try to do is, we read biographies, and we code it, so we underline the important information. We have partner conversations, so they're like very constructed, where the students have to follow these guidelines on how to have a conversation that's kind of modeled after a basic paragraph, but we provide models for them. So we read what it sounds like and what it shouldn't sound like, so they could kind of have an idea of what it would be. And then the speaking with many different partners will lead to the writing, which is kind of a missing link. Like if you don't get to articulate it and practice and make mistakes with your voice, then it's hard to just kind of go from here to the writing. So for English learners especially. So these are some of the collages that I was telling you about that we make with the cutouts. And this was, a lot of the fifth graders did these. And then we did a puppet. The puppet is to kind of help us role play. This is a student's puppet. Another one, and this one here, this student was this one. This just the picture alone is beautiful because she has a little turtle here, and she's showing me that the turtle is on that one as well, and it looks just like her. It's so beautiful. But this is from an article back in 1999 where I was learning how to do all of this stuff, and because we weren't really well trained at the beginning, it was hard to know what to do, but I always tried to teach through art. And so I kept learning how to teach through art and getting better and taking seriously what what I learned at the different workshops that I went to so that I could get better at teaching art. I think I have, Jake, do we have I have a couple more minutes still, right? Okay. So I do have enough time. I'll share this in a second, but I just want to share something that I have here. Let me see if I can find it. This is, oh, is it?
Is it on a different desktop maybe, or?
Yeah, I'm not sure how I would be able to get it off. I guess it was set up for my PowerPoint presentation, but not this. I wanted to share like pictures from the new book that I have, but they're not coming up.
Well, while you're looking for it, Mr. Ramirez, I just want to comment on what a wonderful mission that you're leading in your practice of education and teaching. Our mother was a K-4 teacher for almost 40 years. Even though she's no longer here, she would appreciate what you're doing, because not only are you bringing your expertise and your training and your passion to what you're imparting to these very impressionable people, but a lot of this is from your own pocket. Just as she did, you're contributing a lot of the supplies, you're going out and getting the books, you're getting the markers, and if you need to protest to get a raise to be able to do that, then we're behind you. And you know that a lot of what you're doing is really from your own pocket. So we really appreciate the work that you're doing.
Thank you.
And I bought, and the picture and the print that I bought, I have to come to your studio and get the original, but the print that I bought is in memory of her because it's all about schools and education.
Yeah.
And I like that you have brown kids in all of your photos.
Yeah. Thank you.
Also, I saw, a week or so ago about the Basquiat exhibition, and I thought to myself, this is way too difficult for me. This is whatever. I mean, it's too way out. And I see that your kids are learning about all these artists from all over the world, and old ones and new ones, and doing themselves. And some of the collages look like the quilts of G's Bend, of the woman who did all those quilts. I mean, it's just like you should be teaching everyone, not just the kids. You're really wonderful.
Thank you. Well, recently I did get the opportunity. I'm getting out of my comfort zone, and I was providing trainings for TAs on some of the strategies that we're using, and how we use artist biographies and their practice to kind of get our students to kind of see that, not just artists, but a lot of people go through trauma, but how do artists kind of like use those experiences to uplift themselves or to produce something that brings out the beauty of the world, right? So like a lot of the artists that we study have gone through difficult moments, and so our students can kind of maybe identify and see that their struggles can be turned into something that could help them get through it and stuff, which is what I think a lot of us kind of, if we find what we love, I think that's one of the best things that could help drive us.
I'm curious, sometimes you do, say you're a face green and maybe yellow or something like that,
Yeah.
different. What are you thinking?
I think like there's a lot of different things. Part of it was like when I was first sketching it and doing all the gesture drawing, there'd be a lot of lines, and I was just like, I want to keep that. But then also like a lot of our students, and my daughter's like, she's half Mexican but also half Salvadoreña, so kind of to show that in Los Angeles there's a lot of biracial and bicultural, or like a lot of mixture and stuff. So I try to bring that into my paintings as well.
I think it's important also we appreciate that this is Los Angeles in California. He could not be doing this in Florida.
That's right.
Or a good lot of other states in this country. And we really are fortunate that we live here.
I have a question, Jose. In the more like slice of life, sort of paintings that you have, how do you determine this is something worth painting? Like, how do you, whether it's a scene in your classroom or you got the mother and daughter walking along the street, like, how do you, what sticks in your mind? Like, how do you determine that's something I'm going to paint today?
Well, if it's something that's like right in here for me, I definitely want to paint it, and then like finding the right composition, right? So it's like sometimes the composition will just present itself, but other times it might come through the form of like finding how somebody else before me, like a previous artist, might have interpreted it and bringing that in. But other times it's like you'll find this image or like this one composition. It's like this looks like a really like something I could do. So, but at first, the concept, right? The content has to be something that is important for what I'm doing and in line with what I'm painting. Yes?
Yes, it seems to me that you have an exceptional ability to indicate to all these children that they can do this, because I think, even if I'm looking at it, amazing, and I think these kids must have sat there and said, what do you mean I can do this? I'm just talking very casually, but your ability to infuse that idea, how do you do that?
That's a good question. I think just this part of it is because I come in excited about it too, and I'm doing it with them, and because I am an artist, I can kind of like show my samples and then guide them through it. And then naturally, there's going to be some students who are going to be more creative in that way. Like all the kids have to find their avenue, but some kids are going to be able to show it even better. So like I could show my samples, but then when they see this other student doing something that surpasses what I'm doing, or like going in their own direction, then the other kids can kind of learn from them as well. But I think bringing in and having a passion, instead of just saying, here, we're going to do this today, and I'm not that excited about it. But the fruits, right? I have it all over my garden, and I was like walking around my garden and seeing getting excited about all the fruit. I want to bring it into my students and share it with them. So I'm bringing in that excitement with them. Yes?
I think very much related to Patty's question, in one of your photos you pointed to a student and said this student is an artist.
Yeah.
What do we as society need to do to make sure that doesn't get squelched and shut down? Society's great at shutting down girls who like math and science and children who like art, so how do we keep those doors open?
That's a good question, because that particular student, she's a struggling reader. She's a fourth grader who's not reading, and so she's receiving a lot of support, but she's only excited when it's time for that art lesson. But if there was somehow like adults in her life who could show her that passion, so that she could kind of see that she could do the reading, right? Because even when this past week her class came into my room and we were doing like more of a academic type stuff, I could see how she shut down when it was time to read. Even though she had somebody who was enthusiastically going to help her read, I think she already kind of had this block about how she can't read. So hopefully she'll be able to break that code and gain that, because they say like if you aren't a fluent reader by the time you're a third grader, then you're going to be a struggling learner for the rest of your career. Yes.
So two quick questions, then two quick comments, then a question for both you and maybe for Carlton and maybe the pastors among us. First, students at Esperanza obviously are blessed to have a first-rate art education, much better than the one I had when I was a kid. So thank you so much for what you do. Second, to the point about reading, in the LA Unified School System meets statewide standards with respect to reading. Only 40% of students in LA Unified meet state standards for reading. Only 30% meet them in the math level. So my question for you and for Carlton and for others is there any, in our relationship with Esperanza, is there any opportunity for adult tutors to help with respect to reading or math at Esperanza?
That's a great question. I think Mr. Rumble would be the person, my principal, who has mentioned how awesome this your church is and how you all have helped to talk with him about your willingness to come and help us in that level as well. Because it's one thing to beautify the campus, and it's another thing to find the time and the resources to come and provide those services to help those students who need that inspiration or that extra push to show them. So he would be a person to kind of approach about that. And I'll definitely be telling him about it tomorrow. Thank you. Yes?
I like your connection to pointillism, where all the little dots,
Yeah.
really, that's really inspirational.
Yeah. when I saw them in person, the Seurat paintings, I was amazed, right? And even seeing the Van Goghs in person, or seeing an actual Basquiat in person. I don't know, there's a beautiful exhibit of Basquiat's work in downtown LA right now, across the street from the Disney Hall. It'll be here for about 3 more months, but we went to see it, and it's got hundreds of his pieces. And so I definitely recommend anybody going. Yeah. Yes?
I just want to, what do you want to say with your art, and where does that voice come from?
Well, I want to say stuff about the world we live in, and that there's hope, there's like things happening, there's color and stuff, and so that art could be an avenue for like change, just like music and the arts, but they get pushed to the side. I'm lucky that I have like support groups and friends who acknowledge the importance of art and see like how in the past artists and musicians and poets were the thinkers, right? The people who pushed society forward. And so I see kind of little fires of that happening in the places where I'm coming from, with musicians especially. So like the second part of your question was what inspires it, or where does it come from?
Yeah. Yes.
I think like being a kid and growing up and like being sensitive and like not knowing how to express it, but then finally finding out that painting could be something that could be that way, like that could be that thing that could help me kind of navigate through the world, right? Because I was in middle school, LA Unified, and then I got a scholarship to go study at a private boarding school in Sedona, Arizona, so that I got plucked out of my community and placed somewhere where I was really confused and unable to really navigate academically. I wasn't prepared. So I started taking some art classes and playing the drums, and the drums was great because it was a very physical way for me to get all my anger out. But then the art teacher really praised my artwork and liked the way I was doing colors. It was this dumb little exercise with a lot of little squares, but he praised it, and it's like, oh, and so that encouraged me to keep doing more and more art, and people would encourage me. So I thought, okay, I can kind of do this. I wanted to be an architect, but then I ended up, after a year or two at Berkeley in environmental design, moving over to the art department because I was more successful and had more fun, and I kept doing it. So I think like growing up and seeing murals in my community and seeing paintings, and then when I went to visit my mom's brothers in Mexico and seeing that they painted, they were going to college, they weren't artists, but they painted. They were going to become doctors, an engineer, but they had like canvases and they had the oil paints out, and I was like, this is something that I could maybe try. And I would remember, oh yeah, I have a couple of uncles that paint, and even one of them gave my mom a painting of an ocean, and so she had it there. And now, if that's my uncle's painting, he painted that, and that was something that I always remember. So like that encouragement and that a little bit of background, and seeing like the murals from the 1970s that were popping up in East LA that talked about culture and Chicano history and stuff, kind of stuck with me. And then seeing Western artists like Picasso and Van Gogh and the Surrealists, and that's when I first started. I was like trying to copy the way that their paintings and stuff, because that's what somebody does when they're learning, right? They copy who they love, whether it's you're learning a guitar solo or a poem or like a painting. I was copying, and then I finally learned a little bit more about like Mexican art and Chicano art, and like that there's a history there that I could kind of like dig into and kind of use to help develop myself as an artist as well. Yeah. Yes.
A lot of what you do resonates with things that I see at Tia Chuch's out in San Fernando Valley.
Yeah.
I just wondered, do you have some connection with them?
I know Luis Rodriguez, the person who started it, the author and stuff, and as a matter of fact, I'm working on an illustration of an article about him. So I'm going to be doing, he wrote a poem, and he's written a lot. So somebody's writing an article for an online news magazine, and I'm going to do the artwork. So
Well, what I was saying particularly is that he really believes how important the art is in poor communities.
Yeah.
That it's a different way of thinking, it's a different way of encouraging, and so you're very much in sync with what they're doing.
Yes.
Sorry. To your point, also, I think
we're in this area of great privilege, and I worked in South Glendale, and saw constantly the difference between people praising and feeling that the need and desire to funnel their children, I don't know how to say this politically correctly, but there is a disconnect between the idea of going to private schools. And you're an example, and having worked with many teachers who work in inner city, was always saying, no, it's the public schools where you can get this kind of education. And how do we spread this in our society is to continue to let people know that you can go to a public school in a city, in an inner city, and have a wonderful education. Look at the art here and the continuity between the art and all subject matter. And with a principal that is supportive, you can't beat that as a
in a society, right? We should definitely invest in our public schools because we don't say no to anybody, right? Like the charter schools can say no if you don't meet certain criteria, or if there's no special ed in charter schools, but we take everybody. Yes.
Last question.
I just want to publicly say I am awestruck by your work.
Thank you.
I mean, the colors, everything just resonates for me on a soul level. And then to hear your stories behind it just expands that experience. So I know art speaks to each of us individually, but I'm really awestruck by the colors, the images, and your story just enhanced that experience all the more. So thank you so much for what you're doing.
Me too.
Yeah, thank you.
On behalf of Westwood Presbyterian Church, I just want to thank you so much for being here. When Jose and I were speaking on the phone in preparation for this event, he said, I want to talk about how art spiritually connects us to our communities and then empowers us to cultivate spaces of vitality. Whether it's in a garden or a classroom, it's clear that you're doing that work, and we're so grateful for it. Jose's prints are in the back if you'd like to look at more of his prints or perhaps even purchase one. They're available back there, so please do. I'm sure you can speak more with Jose back there as well. Thank you all for coming, and have a wonderful day. Take care.
Thank you.